unique privilege of introducing one of America's most admired and respected men. Former U.S. Senator and 2016 presidential candidate Rick Santorum is the CEO of Echo Light Studios, America's fastest growing faith and family film company. Santorum is the chairman of Patriot Voices, a grassroots and online community of Americans committed to promoting faith, family, and freedom and opportunity. A native of Pennsylvania, Santorum became known as the voice for conservatives who didn't feel their voice was really being represented. Rick and his wife of 24 years, Karen, are the parents of 7 children, and during his run for president several years ago and this time, Rick speaks passionately about his belief that strong families help produce a strong economy. Just this past week, former South Dakota Senator Dan Lederman wrote me these words, and with his permission, I share them tonight. He writes, and I quote, "Missing the stand dinner is especially heartbreaking because of the special guest you have speaking. Senator Santorum is an amazing person. In a utopian world, he would be president, and Congress would have the tools to defeat the social ills that plague us today. Senator Santorum is a class act and who is personable and caring. Our friends, my friends, appreciate Senator Santorum and what he stands for. South Dakota, tonight is our opportunity to thank this man for coming to our great state, and it is also our opportunity to thank him for caring for our family values and its torch in the national public arena when very few else would. Would you please join me in giving to this man, Senator Rick Santorum, a strong South Dakota welcome. Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Dale, very much. Thank you so much for the South Dakota the nice welcome that I get every time I come to South Dakota. Everybody's so nice to me, so I appreciate the great welcome here today. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the hospitality that you've given me. I noticed a couple of you have said, gee, it's so nice of you to come over here and visit us here in South Dakota. And you know, I've just been in Iowa, and in fact, going back to Iowa in the morning. And it's sort of nice to be appreciated that you show up. In Iowa, they sort of expect you to show up. And it's one of those things where, you know, okay, well, I got to see you this afternoon. I'm going to go see somebody else, later today. And you got presidential candidates running all over the place there. And so it's sort of nice to come across the border and be appreciated a little bit more. In fact, I always tell this story that happened to me 4 years ago when I was campaigning. I was in Storm Lake, and I was at a diner, and we had an event in the back. And as is my general notice, is after I finish an event, go out and work the room, go to the restaurant and shake hands to the people who didn't come to the event, but they're potential caucus goers too. And so I'm going around to the booths and the tables and the like, and I come up to this table, and there's an older couple on the left side of the booth, and then there's a even older woman who's on the right side of the booth. And I went over and I said hello to the couple and introduced myself to them, and it was obviously this was their mother or mother-in-law that was across the table. And I introduced myself. Hi, I said I'm Rick Santorum, and she looked at me. She goes, "Stop calling me!" And I said, "Excuse me?" She goes, "Stop calling me. You guys are calling me 5, 6 times a day. All you do is call me, and you call me all the time." And I said, "Well, I'm not calling, but I'm very sorry." She goes, "And when you call me, you always call and ask for my husband." I said, "Well, I'm sorry." "Well, he's been dead for 3 months." And I said, "Well," I looked at her and I said, "Well, he must have robbed the cradle." And she looked up at me and she said, "You can call me anytime." So you aren't being pestered with phone calls and politicians trying to get your vote at every turn, and maybe that's a blessing for you, but don't think you're unimportant. That's really the message I wanted to deliver to you tonight. Don't think that you're unimportant. I know, you're here in South Dakota and things are pretty good here. Your communities are probably stronger than most communities. Your families are probably stronger than most communities. Your churches are probably stronger than most places. Life is, every time I come here, I hear a lot of good things. I know that because I look at the legislation you pass and look at the things that you're pushing. And I know you tend to think, well, maybe, things are good here and we just need to sort of keep things going. But you really can't make a difference here. You really are sort of in your own little oasis in some respects here. Well, you've done some good things already. I want to congratulate you. I see your 2 senators and representative. When I came to Washington, D.C., the senators and representatives weren't exactly as good as the ones you have now. So you've done a good job cleaning up your house here. And I want to congratulate you on that. That was hard work. It took effort to get off and defeat incumbents and to take on that challenge. And so that's a good thing that you took on that responsibility as citizens to try to get your country back in the right direction. But my challenge to you is your work isn't done here. And that's why I joined Dale over in Rapid City last year and I'm here this year. Because we need leadership in America. We need leadership from the places where we've always gotten great leadership. And that's from our state houses and from our laboratories of democracy, as you hear. I do a lot of these dinners and try to encourage cultural conservative organizations, everything from family research centers and other types of organizations like this in various states around the country, crisis pregnancy centers, pro-life groups, etc. I speak in places like Connecticut. Wow. You think you've got it. You think America's tough. You just go to places like Connecticut and California and look at the fights that they're fighting. But you know why they're fighting fights? Because the other side's on the offensive. The other side's on the offensive. They're willing to fight. They don't care if they lose. They're willing to fight. They're always willing to push the envelope. How do you think we got where we are? You think we one day woke up and had a fundamentally different point of view on all these issues? No. They fought every day. You have an opportunity in this state to fight back. You have people in this state, because of the culture in this state, you can elect representatives, you can push legislation that can define the offensive in trying to take America back. And a lot of them are going to say, well, we'll pass these things, the court will strike it down. Who cares? How many times were their laws struck before some judge said, well, maybe that's a good idea? And all of a sudden they started to make an impact because these left-wing states kept pushing the agenda. And what we have, unfortunately, in a lot of our most conservative states, we don't. We just try to protect ourselves from the bad things instead of thinking that the role that you can play in society here in America is the same role that California plays for the left. And you can say, well, we're just a small state. All the better. All the better. You can do it quietly without the left really finding out about you. You can pass these bills and they say, where did this law come from? Oh, South Dakota. Oh, who cares about South Dakota? You know what? A judge might. A judge might somewhere, or a circuit might somewhere. What you can do here is lead America. You're upset. I know you are. I hear it all the time. I can't believe our country's going. Look at all the things that are happening. I hear the anger and the angst. And I know many of you feel that, what can we do? Well, you can do something here. You have the ability to do something here. And you have an organization that's willing to lead and help the legislators that are here. Let me just congratulate the legislators that are here. I served in the Congress for 16 years, 4 in the House and 12 in the Senate. And I can tell you, when I first got elected to the House of Representatives, I ran as a conservative. I ran against a 14-year Democratic incumbent in a 60% Democratic district outside the city of Pittsburgh. I had lived in the community all of 4 years before I decided to run for Congress. I didn't come from a wealthy family. I grew up in government housing on a VA post my 18 years of my childhood. I went through public schools and graduated from Penn State, and all of them, like, you know, not good old meat and potatoes, good education. And I just was furious as heck at my congressman because I thought he was, well, just a phony. He didn't work very hard, and I couldn't stomach either of those, so I just ran against him. I had no chance, none. But I ran. I knocked on 20,000 doors and was able to catch him by surprise. I was outspent over 3-1. I was such a long shot on election night when the AP reported that this incumbent congressman lost. They didn't report who won. I know this because there was an article the next day in the Wall Street Journal, because the Wall Street Journal disclosed that when the AP sent out their wire as to this guy lost. He didn't say who won. So the Wall Street Journal wanted to publish a little blurb about it called the Republican National Congressional Committee, which is the campaign committee for the Republicans in Congress. And they said, you know, this guy lost over here. Who was the Republican opponent? And they didn't have my name. True story. Because they ran that the next day that they'd called, and they didn't know that was my name. I was the longest of the long shots. But when I campaigned for that office, and then again in a 70% Democratic district, because in Pennsylvania we lost 2 congressional districts, one of them was mine, so I got put in with another Democrat 2 years later. I won that seat. And I ran again 2 years later against another Democratic incumbent, this time for the United States Senate. 1 million more Democrats and Republicans. I won that seat. I was a busy man. I was a conservative. I was a member of the Gang of Seven. You may remember that group of 20-some years ago that disclosed all the corruption in the House of Representatives, kicked out the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, actually ended up in jail, the Speaker of the House, and for the first time in 40 years, Republicans took control of the Senate. And, took control of the Congress. That was me. I was at the center of all that. I was bad. I mean, I was just kicking butt and taking names, and I was fighting the conservative cause. But I'll tell you what I wasn't fighting. I wasn't fighting anything having to do with moral and cultural issues. No, no, no. No, I learned early on in my political career that you stay away from those. Because when you do that, you get labeled. You get pigeonholed. You get put off into the corner. Not just by the media. Oh, they do that, big time. But also your own colleagues, even your own Republican colleagues. I saw it. I saw it in just the campaigning I used to do. It's how they looked at those social conservative types who are out of step with history, out of step with where America is going, where young people think, right? Well, when I got elected to the Senate, my life changed a little bit. It was mentioned earlier by a speaker that, you know, when you get married, your life can change a lot. Well, we got married, and my life did change. We had children, and my life change really came when I was in the United States Senate. I want to share a little story with you. I got to the United States Senate. I had just won 3 impossible elections, was the underdog, no chance in any of them. And here I am at 36 years of age in the United States Senate. I think I lowered the average age of the Senate by 10 years when I came to the Senate. And so I'm in the United States Senate, and I'm a bad dude. I mean, I won all these races. I was getting all this stuff done. And I had a senator, older senator, come up to me, put his arm around me one day as I'm walking down the hallway, and he said, you know, Rick, we have a Bible study every Thursday at noon that the chaplain of the Senate puts on. Why don't you come to the Bible study? I said, wow, you know, I'm Catholic. You know, read the Bible. That's a novel idea. Why don't you think of doing something like that? So I said, yeah, okay. Maybe I'll go to a Bible study. I started to go to this Bible study, and the guy who gave it was a guy named Lloyd John Ogilvie. He was the chaplain of the Senate. He was an amazing pastor, amazing. I never heard God's voice until I heard Lloyd Ogilvie speak, because that guy had a voice like God had. I mean, it's an amazing voice. So he taught you the Bible. He's reading it. You're thinking, wow, that's how God sounds when he's reading the Bible. And so it was an amazing experience going to this Bible study. And the second thing has happened, I moved my family down because I wanted to be close to them when I was in the Senate. It was a much tougher, longer job in Washington. And we found a church and found a pastor. I'll never forget going into that church and hearing that pastor talk. And for the first time in 36 years, the gospel just got hammered at me. And I'll never forget sitting there just being blown away about what God's call on me was. It was just delivered to me like it had never been delivered. I remember walking in that church and being angry that for 36 years I'd never heard that a pastor had never gone up and spoken the truth and really preached the gospel. So here's my comment to you. If you're not a pastor, when you have an opportunity to see a friend who you think's a good person, but you know doesn't know the Lord, put your arm around him sometime and invite him. Don't be afraid to reach out to them and testify, evangelize. They may say no and they may put you off. But ladies and gentlemen, if we're going to get this country back, this country needs a revival. And a revival isn't going to start in the pulpit. It's going to start out here. It's going to start with people understanding the importance of faith in their lives and having the courage to share it and be vulnerable. I didn't really know this senator very well when he asked me to do this. At some level, I almost thought, what the heck's he asking me to do that for? What does he know about me? But, I got over that very, very quickly. And to this day, I now thank him for what he did because he changed my life. God went from something that I did on Sundays and a checklist. If you asked me the faith test, I could check all the faith tests. I knew the stuff. But God wasn't in the center of my life. It wasn't what I was living my life for. That fundamentally changed you, and it changed my life. Here's what I learned. I learned God speaks in whispers. And unless you're close, you're not going to hear what God has called for you in your life. I got close, and it changed my life. And I would say to the pastors out there, our country is in trouble. We have murdered over 50 million babies. 50 million babies. We're always horrified when we hear about these pagan cultures sacrificing children to please the gods. We're sacrificing children to please ourselves. We're sacrificing children because we deny truth. We know the truth, but we just think we're more important than that. We are afraid and scared of what our lives will be because there aren't other people there to love us and support us and tell us the truth and nurture us. Because we have a society that's abandoned children in the most dramatic way when we say life in the womb is disposable. And if you have any doubt, after the horror of all these tapes that came out, after the horror of Planned Parenthood, now the dominant meme on all of our liberal stations is defending Planned Parenthood. These tapes were doctored, or this is not true, all these things. They didn't break the law. Parse, lie, twist, justify all the evil to serve our own needs. That's where we are, ladies and gentlemen. That's where we are. We didn't get this way. We didn't get to where marriage, an institution of God, institution that is biblical, an institution that, by the way, is in every civilization known to man. And for the first time in human history, you have allowed something sacred, good, necessary, as a foundational pillar to our society to be destroyed. I would say to all the pastors, there was a survey done just recently, about a year ago, by a group called Barna. They do a lot of surveys in the area of religion. And they surveyed pastors in America, and they asked this question: how many of you preach on the issue of pornography and marriage and abortion and a whole host of moral and cultural issues that are biblically based truths? Interestingly enough, 90% of pastors say they agree with the biblical interpretation, with the biblical truth of all of these issues. Then they ask the second question: how many of you ever preach on those issues in your pulpit? Answer, interestingly enough, 90% don't. 90% don't. Here's what I'd say to all the pastors out here, and I would encourage you to share it with your other pastors. If you don't have the courage at a time when our country and the soul of America is in peril to get in front of a group of people, offend your donors, offend the people who tell you, don't talk about those things, or I'll leave the church. If you don't have the courage to stand up and speak the gospel truth, get out of the pulpit and give it to somebody else to do. And here's what I would say to all of us. One of my favorite stories is a story about a man by the name of G.K. Chesterton, who was a great writer and thinker of the previous century. He was a known moralist in London at the turn of the last century. And he was asked by one of the London liberal tabloids to write an article of which they intended to publish and then poke fun at him for all the things that he would say. And the title of the article was to be, "What's Wrong with the World?" Of course, they thought Chesterton would list all these evils that liberal British society was heaping upon the masses. Well, Chesterton, in spite of what he knew was the objective of this tabloid, said, "I'd be happy to write that." And so the next day he submitted his essay, and here's what his essay said. The title, "What's Wrong with the World?" His essay said, "I am." Respectfully submitted, G.K. Chesterton. Ladies and gentlemen, we can look at all the problems in the world. We can look at all the reasons. We can blame Hollywood. We can blame the media. We can blame education. We can blame the liberal elite. We can blame government. We can blame everybody. But the reality is, it happened on our watch. We don't live in a dictatorship, ladies and gentlemen. We don't have authoritarians running this country. You do. And so when they did all those things, like take Bibles out of schools and stop prayer in school and abortion and all of these policies of sexual liberation, what did we do? Well, we tried to protect ourselves and our family, and we didn't like it. We complained about it. We felt uncomfortable. Most. But did we fight? Oh, we may have put up a protest here and there. I mean, we still have the March for Life once a year. You know what the other side does when they want to change things? They fight. They sue. They march. They fund. They organize. They lie, they cheat, they steal. Yes, they do all those things. Because they want to win. Now, I know why you don't do it. I know. Because America is still the greatest country in the world. We're still the most free country in the world. We're still a great and wonderful people, particularly, I'm sure, the people in this room. And so you can go home tonight and say, I can still have my life and my family's still this and, all those things until it isn't anymore. Until it isn't, even in South Dakota, anymore. And then what do you do? Well, then maybe we'll fight. But ladies and gentlemen, we're frogs sitting in the pot on the stove. And the water's getting hotter and hotter, and we think we're in a sauna. Yes, it's still wonderful here in America. But we have allowed in our lifetime to let this country slip morally and ethically to a point that it's never been seen before. And if you look at the history of every civilization known to man, usually when this descent starts, it's very, very hard to turn around. But America is different. America, unlike most of those other countries, didn't really have the freedoms we have, the opportunity to stand up and step up and fight. Some are fighting. Kim Davis is fighting. But even most Republicans running for president, condemned her for fighting. Oh, she has to follow the law. There's only one law that we have to follow, ladies and gentlemen. And that's God's law, the natural law. That's the law we have to follow. That's the one we must follow. If the law was passed that said you had to kill your son, would you do it? No. Why? Because it's an unjust law. And you are not required to follow an unjust law. In fact, you're required to stand up and fight unjust laws, and we are not. Why? Well, because it doesn't affect me. You see, all the things that we complain about the other side, we have to start looking at what we do. Not in going along. Oh, come on. You all know this. You all know this. Satan doesn't want all you good people to join him. I'm sure he'd love to, but he doesn't expect you to join him and push the agenda in his direction and destroy the basic foundational values of our country. He wouldn't expect you to do that. He's not encouraging you to do that. What does he encourage you to do? Nothing. Nothing. That's how he wins. When good people do nothing. People ask me all the time, why are you running for president? You're 1%. I mean, you have no chance. You have this and that. You know what? Because I'm not going to do nothing. Because I'm not going to sit here and say, well, it's somebody else's problem. Or I can take care of my own family. Or things will turn around miraculously on their own. You are good people. And this is a good state. You are blessed. And what does the Bible say? To whom much is given, much is expected. To whom more is given, more is required. Required. Your bar is higher. You're in pretty good shape here in this state. This country needs you. Now, I know I'm speaking to the choir. You're here, and you say, you know, why are you dumping on me? I'm here. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. But we need more soloists out of the choir. The men and women that you have here are elected officials. I guarantee you they are not beloved by their fellow conservatives, Republicans, certainly not by Democrats. If they're out there fighting on these issues, they're not loved. I can tell you when I first took a step forward and started to fight on pro-life bills, I was the leader of the Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act. Debated that bill for 7 years on the floor of the United States Senate. Some of the best, toughest debates on pro-life that we've ever had. And I went from being the conservative senator from Pennsylvania. You know, they never say the liberal senator from Pennsylvania. They always say the conservative. If you're a liberal, you're just the senator. But if you're a conservative, you get labeled. It's true. It's what they do. Let's just put it this way. After I started taking on these issues, my kids thought my first name had been changed to Ultra. Because you get labeled as one of those candidates. Happened to me when I ran for president 4 years ago. Happened to me this time. Oh, he's just that social conservative candidate. I've fought on every issue you can possibly imagine. Passionately. On sanctioning Iran and Syria, particularly Iran with its nuclear program, 12 years ago. I fought for health savings accounts, which I actually authored the first bill on and pushed that. Tax reform, balanced budgets amendments, which I was one of the principal authors of. A whole host of other reforms, like welfare reform. I was the principal author, and I was in the House, and I was the manager on the floor of the Senate that passed the only repeal of a federal entitlement. The press will never talk about that. Never include that in their description. It's always Santorum, that pro-life, pro-family guy. Why? Because they hate us. Because they know that if they get the family, if the family continues on its course of deterioration and breakdown, if the church continues to be under assault and withers and collapses, it's over and they win. So they are going to give no quarter to these legislators. They'll give no quarter to you. If you do what I encourage you to do, which is to be bold and try to change this country right here from South Dakota, eventually they'll figure you out and they will come after you. You better be prepared, because they are not nice. If you start to make a difference, they will attack. And when I say they, I mean all of they. Let me encourage you. If you look and Google my name, in fact, don't do it. It is one of the most filthy, horrible things you will ever read in your life. They did that to my last name. 13 years ago, they did that to my name, to my kid's name, to the name of my dad, and my grandfather, who fought for freedom. They thought they could dissuade me. They could intimidate me. That's what they think they'll do. They'll try to dissuade you and intimidate you. They'll try to do that to Dale and to all the leaders who are leading the fight. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the truth. We have what is right and good for this country. And you have the knowledge, not just the faith, the knowledge that what you're doing is right for your children and for the future of this country. One of my favorite sayings is, every day we get up and we tell ourselves lies so we can live. And the lie we all tell ourselves is, I'm just one person, I can't do anything, I'm not that important, and you know what, I just have to be concerned about myself. That's a lie. It's a lie that the father of lies wants to tell you and remind you to tell yourself. Tonight you have an opportunity to do something. You were called here for a reason, to hear this message. You may have indigestion now because of it, but you were called here to hear this message. God wanted you to hear this, and he, for some reason, wanted me to deliver it. This room can make a huge difference in the future of our country. I know you find that hard to believe, but let me assure you, smaller groups of people have had bigger impacts on larger countries. Why? Because they wanted it, and they were not going to be denied. When is it that people who are faithful, God-fearing, believing in the truth and in the greatness of our country are willing to believe again, to the point that those who created this country are willing to believe? The signers of the Declaration of Independence, all of them were wealthy people. They had a lot to lose. And when they signed that declaration, they knew they were giving it all up. They were committing treason. They were going to probably be executed. Their family were going to be destitute. It was over. If we lost, They signed anyway. Their life wasn't bad. Their life was good. Oh, yeah, they had a few taxes being imposed on them. But they were wealthy men. Life was good. But they knew the truth, and they were willing to fight for it. That all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, first of which was life. And they signed at the bottom of that document, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and something you don't hear ever in America today, honor. Honor. Don't you want it to be said of you that you are honorable? That you stood at a time when your country needed you. You did the honorable thing. You stood for truth. You stood for God. You stood for America. I believe in you. I pray you believe in yourselves. God bless.